Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and welcoming back to the show, got the Parish of Rock. How are you, mate?
I'm very good. Really looking forward to this. Thanks for coming, having me back on. And what a brilliant subject.
This is a humdinger, mate. We are going to choose the five greatest 70s UK glam albums. So the premise of this show is we pick 5 to 1, one album per artist. This is really tough because there were so many great albums, glam albums that came out of the UK in the early 70s, wasn't there, Parish?
There certainly was. Yeah, there was loads. And I'm slightly distracted because I'm just absolutely surrounded by CDs and albums.
And
This, go on.
oh, and just trying to work out, what's going to make the final cut.
Absolutely. I mean, this was really difficult. This was really
Yeah.
difficult on a number of measures. So, firstly, there's a load of really good glam acts that, in my view, didn't actually record very good albums. The singles were brilliant, but didn't necessarily record. Well, let's put it this way: the albums were hit and miss. There were some good tracks on them, and some not so good tracks on them. So that was difficult. Second thing was difficult. That was when, even though I knew at least three of the five artists that would make the cut, I still haven't necessarily decided which album I'm going to pick on for those artists. There's at least two on some of them, and on one of them there's three albums I still haven't quite decided. So I'm going to be deciding on the hoof a little bit which album I'm going to run with
I
on some
love
of
that.
these
I love that.
artists.
So this is
So
a thought process in the moment.
yeah,
So,
in the
all
moment,
right.
and I'm going to have to make a decision. And then the
Yeah.
last reason it was really difficult is, in a couple of occasions, what's the definition of glam rock? So obviously there was the look,
Yeah.
sort of the makeup and the hair and that kind of normally there was at least one band member of the band that was maybe a little bit glammed up a little bit more effeminate.
Mm.
But musically, what do you define as glam rock? And when you actually, in fact, I was watching a show on YouTube recently when they said there was no musical style to glam rock; it was purely a look. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there are some things that categorise it from a musical standpoint, and I wrote those down. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to quickly rattle through what I think are the
Yeah, go for
characteristics.
it.
So
Go for it.
firstly, I think it's generally commercial guitar orientated rock. So that's the first thing. Secondly, very hooky with big choruses,
Yes.
generally up tempo and positive. You didn't get a lot. You didn't really get any shoegazing type bands amongst any of this.
No.
Lots of riffs and power chords. So guitars front and center, but equally the drums are front and center as well, I think.
Yes.
Big personality vocals. So certainly on all of these bands, the vocalists are very strong, big personalities, and it's, I reckon, on pretty much all of the glam rock, the roots were definitely in 50s rock and roll. Some more than others, but there's definitely a 50 rock and roll aspect to it. So that to me kind of characterises the sound as well as the look. So, but yeah, I'd go as far as to say, of all of the shows I've done with you, Grant Rock Warehouse and the Contrarians, this has been the hardest to actually do.
Well, I love putting challenges out, and I'm sure
Yeah,
you're going to step up to the plate. The only thing I'll add is attitude. Glam rock had a particular attitude to it,
yeah,
and it didn't necessarily translate commercially to America. It did
it
really
definitely
well in
didn't.
Australia, but maybe a lot of the imagery was a little bit harsh for the American market. And that's something that maybe we can touch upon as we go through these albums. And
Yeah,
another thing is a lot of these albums weren't hits in America. It generated some buzz and sales later in America, maybe not at the time. So we'll start it off. We'll go 5 to 1. What is your first pick, number
well,
5?
okay, so I've looked at this kind of two ways. How glam was the band, and how much do I like the album? So my number 5 comes from this band, The Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
I would say one of the definitive glam rock bands. The thing with The Sweet, though, is when you go to the albums aren't necessarily that glam rock. The singles was where the glam rock sat, with Blockbuster and Hellraiser and Ballroom Blitz, etc. But very few, certainly on the original releases, very few of those songs actually appear on the albums. And the albums are more, I would say, heavy rock albums than glam rock albums. So I was torn between 2 albums, both released in 74. But the one I'm going to go with is this one.
Right.
So
nice.
Destination Boulevard. This is the UK release. The American release has a different track listing. And in fact, the American release is a hybrid of this one and the other album I nearly went with, which was Sweet F.A. or Sweet Fanny Adams. So, but this is really good. It's got some really good this has got some glam songs on it, which is one of the reasons I picked it. The 16's and Fox on the Run. Although interestingly, the version of Fox on the Run on this is not the same as the single. This I mean, vocally it sounds very similar, but the guitars are much heavier on this. But you've got some really great, I think anyway, some really great sort of more heavy rock songs with Turn It Down and Breakdown. It's also the only album I think I've got which has got a whole track which is effectively a drum solo, The Man with the Golden Arm. So it has got a bit of vocals, but it is effectively Mick Tucker on drums doing a drum solo on that song. The only letdown is it's got a version of My Generation, which is okay but unnecessary. And when you think of how many good singles they had out at the time, they could easily have flicked that over for one of their own singles. But I think the thing was Sweet was they were a band of almost schizophrenic, really, because there was the singles, which were the Chin and Chapman singles, were to hit the charts. But they actually wanted to be treated as a credible and an authentic rock band. So where they had more control over the album, that's what they did. So they were always trying to avoid putting singles on the album, certainly in the UK if they could. I don't know if I've mentioned it on this show before, but I have mentioned it on shows. I also knew Mick Tucker very briefly when I was about 17. I used to go to Scouts. Around the corner from where I went to Scouts was a pub, and Mick Tucker used to drink in that pub. So on a Friday night, we'd wander around and look to see if his sports car was in the car park, and if it was, we'd go in. Sometimes he didn't want to chat, sometimes he did. I found out since it would have been just soon after his wife passed away, but to be honest, didn't know that at the time. But he was very, on some nights he was very chatty, and actually was the inspiration behind me picking up the drumsticks, because I was in there a few times, not sure whether I wanted to play the drums, and he was the one who persuaded me that as long as you can play a basic rhythm, you can be a drummer. So, yeah. So I kind of knew Mick Tucker, so I've got knew him in passing, obviously not very well, but because of that, bit of a sweet, pardon the pun, sweet spot for the Sweet. So that's my number 5.
No, that's a great start, and thank you for that little bit of that anecdote. That's fascinating. I love the Sweet. Enough said. You may hear more about this later. My number 5 is where art rock meets glam rock, and I'm going to pick Roxy Music, For Your Pleasure from 1973. So this went to number 4 in the UK charts. Brian Ferry. This was the last to feature Brian Eno. I would describe this album as a bit Parish avant-garde, but it's got Hollywood glam. It's not really super commercial. It's arty, it's experimental. It makes the listener work for it, but the rewards are plenty. This is where the Brian Ferry legend starts. You could always see, like when you're looking at these early clips of Brian Ferry, Parish, you can see your eyes are on him, and you can see that he had that X factor, that charisma, and this is where it all starts. And I love this album. Do the Strand, Beauty Queen, In Every Dream, Home and Heartache. I think it's wonderful. Roxy music in the early 70s is a much different beast to when they became sophisticated art rock, and I'm talking about Avalon, and became really loungy. So it's quite an interesting evolution where they were really college, arty, avant-garde, and then they morphed into something that was very, super-duper sophisticated cocktail rock. Are you a fan of Roxy music?
I am, and definitely those earlier albums. I mean, they were. I mean, what I like about, Brian Ferry I love anyway. I mean, as a vocalist, he's just got such a, well, I was going to say unique voice. I mean, quite a few people emulated him later, but at the time, a unique voice. And the songs are fantastic. But, I mean, another characteristic of glam, actually, which I didn't mention, is the use of the saxophone on quite a lot of the albums. And they were big on that, weren't they? They had a lot of that. And so, yeah, they didn't quite make me cut. There's a spoiler for you. They didn't quite make me cut, but I really like Roxy music.
Andy McKay on saxophone, absolutely spot on. Phil Manzanera on electric guitar, Paul Thompson on drums, great musos. But Brian Eno. So this is, I think, when he left the band, then they became less avant-garde and more commercial. So he's the outlier, the one that's really sort of anchored them into something that's not as commercial. But I love this album, so it makes my top five.
They had a huge. I mean, they split, didn't they? Split up about, I think, 75, 76, and then came back with Trash. And then, which I thought was a great album, I really like that. And then Avalon, and by Avalon they'd morphed into a very different band, as you mentioned earlier. But bands like Japan, ABC, probably even I would suggest Spandau Ballet early days. You can hear a huge amount of Roxy music in all of those bands.
Even Duran Duran. Just with a lot more with synth pop and maybe some chic bass and drums. Duran Duran is probably a melding between Roxy music at Japan and chic. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right, over to you. Choice. What's your number 4?
Okay, my next one is, I had 3 albums vying, and I'm going to make a choice now. So the band is Mott the Hoople, and I guess the obvious choice would be All the Young Dudes, but I'm not going to go with that. You could go with the album Mott, but I'm not going to go with that. The one I've just decided I'm going to run with is The Hoople.
So, there you go.
So I'm picking this one. Kicks off with the golden age of rock and roll, and finishes, bookends with my favourite Mott the Hoople song, and I think one of the sort of classic glam songs, "Roll Away the Stone." And in between, you've got some great songs like Crash Street Kids, Pearl and Roy, Born Late '58. So probably not the definitive Mott the Hoople, as I say. I think most people would probably go with All the Young Dudes, but I love this album, and last minute decided The Hoople by Mott the Hoople.
Nice. No, that's a good pick. My number 4 is Suzi Quatro, the self-titled, producer Mike Chapman, Nicky Chin. Suzi Quatro is regarded as glam because she had the image, the attitude. It was tougher, it was stripped down, and it was very pop savvy, hook driven rock songs. So, and it goes into what you were saying earlier, Parish, where a lot of the lineage with glam goes back to the 50s, that rockabilly, that tough image.
Yeah.
So she had a crack band, Len Tuckey on guitars, Alistair McKenzie on piano, Dave Neal on drums. And this album, 48 Crash. Overseas versions of this album have Can the Can, but you've also got stuff like Primitive Love and Shaking All Over and All Shook Up. Legend has it that Elvis actually rang her and said that, her version of All Shook Up was the best version he's ever heard. So that's fair praise indeed. But this was, in my opinion, her best album. It's the pure essence of Suzi Quatro. And I think she's criminally underrated by a lot of folk. It really irritates me, Parish, where when you look at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and you'd see people like Joan Jett, Blondie, anybody that's like female rock that get inducted, but they're forgetting Suzi Quatro. She was the real vanguard, the real sort of the person that was really being the fierce warrioress of rock before anybody else. And hopefully one day she'll get the recognition that she deserves. In America, and I've said this so many times, they just think of her as Leva Tuscadero of Happy Days and that duet that she did with Smokey. Stumbling in, which was a bit of a hit. But in the UK, she's like a quadruple threat, presenter, actress, all sorts of things. I think she lives there now, and I think she's a UK citizen too.
Yeah,
I think
a little bit of trivia. She was on the news recently because she realised she'd just passed her driving test, and she'd realised she'd been driving in the UK for nearly 50 years without a driving licence.
Oops.
She'd had a driving licence in America when she first came over. That covered for her. And she just thought it went on forever, but apparently it covered her for the first year she lived over here, and then after that she should have got her own a UK driving licence. And something came up. I don't quite know how she realised, but yeah,
absolutely.
She realised that so she was all, obviously not. She wasn't in trouble over it because she wouldn't be all over the airwaves talking about it, would you? if it was something you were trying to keep secret. But so a bit of trivia there. And I saw her. I'm trying to think if it was beginning of last year or the end of the year before. But I saw her at the Royal Albert Hall, and she's still brilliant live. I mean, I've seen her over the years. I was too young to see her in the heyday, but I first saw her probably early 80s, and then I've seen her. Probably 7 or 8 times since then. Always really good. Lots of charisma on stage. The vocals are, how many vocalists do we see now where the vocals have gone, but hers hasn't. Her vocals are still pretty strong, very strong, in fact. Still got the presence. Still got the bass sort of hung low. Not so much the tight-fitting leathers anymore, but to be fair, but apart from that. Still iconic, still brilliant. So, yeah, excellent choice.
Absolute head scratch why she didn't make it big in America, beyond that easy listening duet with Smokey.
Well, she's American, isn't she? I mean, that's
absolutely. So you think around 80, 81, where Joan Jett was big with I Love Rock and Roll, you think that may have been where the door might have been open for a second coming, and then she could have really done a marketing push, whoever record label she was with, to try to conquer America and say, hey, I'm actually the inspiration for this artist. It's a total head scratch. But anyway.
She released an album, or a joint album, I'm trying to think now, 5 years ago maybe, which was herself on vocals and bass, Andy Scott from the Sweet on guitar,
Yeah, the
and Don
supergroup.
Howe on the
Yes.
drums. The supergroup, and the album. They're all. I think they're all cover versions. They're pretty much all cover versions. So the album's a little bit hit and miss, but it's still. I still like it. I still enjoy it, and certainly seeing them live was really good fun. And there's
Yeah.
such chemistry between them as well. So that those sort of old heroes, if you like, of the glam era, clearly still, keep in touch, talk.
Mm,
Because there was real charisma across the three of them.
yeah, absolutely. All right, mate. What's your next pick?
So my next pick, again, this is one where I'm trying to decide which album to go with, and I've pulled the albums out. So again, I've actually just decided I'm switching this album at the last minute. So
I like that. I like that.
so the
Spontaneous.
album I was going to go with, T-Rex. I was going to go with Electric Warrior. I even had my vinyl version, which I got a few years ago, out. So,
Oh, that is superb.
and there's the photograph from the back, from where it was actually taken. So I've always assumed it was actually posed, but it's actually from a concert.
It's a great album cover, isn't it? Great album
Brilliant
cover.
album cover, and I nearly went to that, but I'm not actually going to. I'm going to go with Slider.
Ah,
Slider. And I'll tell you what's kind of... I've spent all week playing the albums and can't decide which ones I'm going to go with. So I decided in the end, because T-Rex is very much, in my mind, a singles band as much as an album band, probably more of a singles band really, that I decided I'd go with the two songs. So on both albums there's two hits.
yes, that's correct.
And it's the hits that I've kind of decided at the last minute. So on Electric Warrior, the hits are Jeepster and Get It On. Both big hits, both well known. But on the Slider, the hits are, it kicks off with Metal Guru, which is my favourite T-Rex song and one of my favourite songs of all time. And also Telegram Sam. So they're the two big hits, and by a very, very slender margin, those two songs are I prefer than the other two songs. Probably because Get It On, I've heard it so often that I kind of bit fed up with it. So yeah. So based on the fact they're a singles band, I'm going to go with the two singles that tip this. So as I say, kicks off with Metal Guru, Mystic Lady. The next song is really good. You've got. I mean, the thing about T-Rex is, certainly during this period, the singles are very guitar riff kind of sound to them, but on the albums he's quite mellow, and his voice, whilst distinctively Mark Boland, is a bit more laid back. So you've got some really good stuff on here, like Mystic Lady, as I've already mentioned, Rabbit Fighter, Baby Strange, which are a bit more mellow. And probably my favourite album track actually is Chariot Tugal on the album, which I absolutely love. So very tough to decide between the two albums. And it was Mark Boland that got me into rock music. So back in 71, probably maybe even 1970, seeing him on Top of the Pops, that's what started my love of rock music. Yes, there's other bands I like more, other bands we're going to talk about today that I like more, but if it hadn't been for Mark Boland, I probably wouldn't be sat here now. So yeah, absolutely love T-Rex. Really close call between the two of them. So there's both the albums together. That's from the recent box set that just came out of the studio albums, which is what I was flicking through. But yeah, so that's my number 3 album, T-Rex and the Slider. Oh, and the other thing to mention about the Slider is Slash says that is where he got his look from. The top hat and the hair. He openly says he got that from Mark Boland and the Slider album. So there you go.
Right. Okay. Well, I've actually picked T-Rex Electric Warrior as my number 3. I think that it's just a decimal point above the Slider. So you got to pick T-Rex. He was so charismatic. He was sensual. The women loved him. He had that distinctive voice. Let's face it, all the songs had about 3 or 4 chords, but the way he arranged those chords were great. And the chords, the arrangements and the song, the origins of a lot of his songs were muddy waters. You hear these little blues arrangements, but he sort of morphed it into something that was kind of glammy, kind of, I don't know. He was just, it's like he came from a different planet. And I think, when you were saying you saw him on the Top of the Pops, imagine you as an impressionable young lad watching that. You go, wow, what the hell am I watching? He was really sort of a behemoth in the glam world or pop world in the early 70s. So this album, Jeepster, Get It On, I mean, how many people have covered Get It On? The royalties would just be kicking off over. But there's a lot of other songs that are on this album that I really like Cosmic Dancer, Lean Woman Blues, Life's a Gas, Rip Off.
Life's a Gas is brilliant.
Oh, I think it's a brilliant album, but there's just not much between those two. But yeah, I could not, it'd be remiss if I didn't pick a T-Rex album. They are, when you think of UK glam, they're definitely one of the artists. And Mark Bolan, yeah, God bless him. He was one of the greats.
And you say about the look, I mean, I might be exaggerating this slightly, but I think he had the same impact in the UK that Elvis Presley had in the States. So when Elvis Presley went on TV for the first time, it shocked, didn't it? It shocked America. And it's bizarre looking back now, but Mark Bolan shocked the UK when he first went on. And all he had was a little bit of glitter, some eyeliner, a very small amount of lipstick, and he had that big corkscrew hair look. But yeah, that was as shocking to 1970s Britain as Elvis had been in the States. And that was part of his appeal. My parents, well, not so much my dad, because my dad was a rock and roller, so all that my dad would ever say is, oh, this is like, this is a rip-off of what I grew up on. Not necessarily T-Rex, but generally. But my mother hated Mark Boland, and it was the fact that my mum couldn't stand Mark Boland, and in particular the way he looked was the reason I loved him. Rock and Roll Rebellion and all that. So
yeah, and passed away, way too young in 1977. Yeah. He actually toured with the Damned, so he was starting to get a little bit of a comeback going. I reckon, hand on heart, he would have flourished in the 80s. I could have honestly seen he would have been the sort of artist that would have explored different sonics, the new romantics, because there were so many artists that he sort of influenced that were flourished in the pop world in the 80s. And he would have been big.
Yeah, I mean, the punk, he had a TV show called Mark that was playing out just before he died, and on that he had artists like The Damned, The Jam, Generation X, etc. And another person who cites him as a huge influence is Billy Idol. He says that quite a lot of his vocal mannerisms he pinched from Mark Bolan. Doesn't sound like him. I mean, he's got a totally different type of voice, but he says some of the mannerisms he has was pinched from Mark Bolan. So yeah, and I agree. I think he would have made a comeback in the late 70s and or the late 80s. Early 80s. Yeah, absolutely.
I think so. He would have flourished. All right, mate. What's your number 2?
And he was built for MTV as well.
Yes. Well, he He was photogenic.
Yeah, he would have made the States. So my next album, and this, so number 2. So as I said earlier, my scoring was how much I like the album and how glam rock they are. And this album is the album I like most out of the ones we're going to talk about. But maybe then they're the least glam rock of the bands, although they are classed as glam rock. And the band is the Heavy Metal Kids, and the album is Kitsch. So the first time I saw the Heavy Metal Kids was on Top of the Pops, and they did a song from this album called She's No Angel. Have a look at that, and you'll see that they're definitely a glam rock band. They were part of the Mickey Most Rack label, so kind of in amongst all of that. Came out in 76, I think this album's right at the tail end. Before we came on, we mentioned John Sinclair in another context. John Sinclair was a member of the Heavy Metal Kids, so the keyboards on the album is John Sinclair. Gary Holton was the lead singer. I don't know if Auf Wiedersehen Pet ever made its way to Australia as a TV series, but he was on that in the early 80s. But I love this album. Best tracks, I mean, as you know, I don't like ballads, but my favourite ballad of all time is on this. Cry For Me, I just think it's classic, brilliant. Kicks off with a orchestral song, and then kicks into Chelsea Kids, and from there on it's glam rock with a hint of punk, with a bit of prog, but definitely a glam rock album in my view. I just to double check I wasn't kidding myself, I went on googled them, and they're classed under Wikipedia as glam rock, and they're ranked at number 15 of the top glam rock bands ever. So at least they're classed as glam rock, even if the upper. So my favourite album out of the ones we're talking about, but probably the least glam rock of the artists. So that's why they're number 2.
Good stuff. Well, thank you for that. My number 2 is from 1972, and it's Sweet, Fanny Adams. So this is the second studio album. It actually was released in 1974, correction. This was a significant shift from their bubblegum pop to a heavier rock sound, and I love it. I think, Set Me Free, Rebel Rouser, Peppermint Twist, Sweet FA, Restless, AC/DC, and to think that there were songs that were released outside this and didn't make it onto this album, like Blockbuster, which was their only number 1 UK hit, and Ballroom Blitz. But I love this album. I think they were kind of like trying to be a Deep Purple, I agree, or a Uriah Heep. They had the harmonies. Andy Scott, to me, I think is so underrated. He was like a guitar hero. Mick Tucker, what a drummer. His drum fills all the way through that album. If he was at the pub, I would be just waxing lyrical to him, how much I'd be janking his chain a little bit. He was a phenomenal drummer. But, I just think Steve Priest, I think they had a chemistry. It's a bit of a sad, tragic story about Brian Connolly and Sweet. They should have been much bigger. They were able to, put this album together. I think the story with this band, Parish, is that they wanted to get away from the bubblegum. They wanted to write their own music and get away from the Mike Chapman, Nicky Chin, Savani, this is what you have to do. They wanted, and I think this album was their statement of, this is the sort of music we want to play, and we want to muck in with the Uriah Heeps and the Deep Purples and the Freeze and all that sort of stuff. But, they were maybe they were a little bit sort of leather jacketed by the whole glam thing, the whole being a teenage idol on Top of the Pops. But anyway, I think this is a great album. And again, it would have been a tough one between the album you chose and Fanny Adams. Isn't it funny? There's a lot of these acts that we're choosing where it's two, and it's just like a decimal point between both of them.
Absolutely.
You like this album, don't you?
I love the album, as I say. I nearly picked it, and I think Sweet. I think you're absolutely right about Sweet. I think and I think this is when you look at the album sales for almost all of the glam acts, the albums didn't actually do that well. And that's because they were singles bands and they were chart bands, and therefore their fan base tended to be, like me, sort of 9, 10, up to sort of early teens. So we didn't have a lot of money, so we were going to go and buy the singles, particularly as the singles weren't on the albums. We weren't going to try out an album that didn't have a song on it that we didn't know.
Yes.
But the other side of that was the serious kids, like my elder brothers, who were out there buying Yes and Genesis and Pink Floyd and the Eagles, and they wouldn't touch a band like the Sweet with a barge pole, because they were like a teeny band, So I think they brought out serious rock albums, but the fan base that they hoped to have wouldn't give them light of day, and as I say, younger people like me, we weren't going to invest in an album that we didn't at least recognise some of the songs of. So I think they were caught between those two markets. Clearly, they did well on the singles market, even to the extent that latterly they did have songs that they wrote themselves, like Fox on the Run and Action and Love is Like Oxygen. So they did break through with the singles themselves. But the albums never really charted very well. In fact, I think only one of the albums, and I can't remember if it was, I think it was Sweet FA, was the only album that made the top 20 in the UK, which is unbelievable when you think of their single success.
Yeah, and another thing I didn't say is that so influential to a lot of the glam hair metal bands in the 80s on the Sunset Strip. Like, I'm looking at you, Motley Crue. There's a lot of the songs that Motley Crue wrote where they're blatant direct lifts from Sweet songs.
Well, and they admit it as well, don't they? They do say that they were big fans.
Unbelievable. Rat, Quiet Riot, I think they all need to tip their hat to the Sweet.
But even the look,
way influential.
Even the look of the blonde lead singer and the rest of the band with dark, brown or black hair. I mean, how many of the glam acts had that look, with wearing a kind of a makeup, but also covered in leather? I mean, so many of the glam or hair metal bands of the States just nick the image from Sweet as well as the songs. So,
yeah, absolutely. But anyway, their music lives on, and for me, I think this is one of the greatest glam albums of the 70s in the UK.
Yeah, agreed. And that was, until we sat down, that was probably the Sweet album I was going to go with, and then decided, as I said, at the last
a switcheroony at the last moment. All right, what's your number one, mate?
You probably know the band, but you might not know the album. So again, the band for me has to be Slade. So
of course,
there you go, Slade.
Yes,
Slade and the Back, one of my favourite bands of all time. Probably the band, certainly during that period, the band I'd seen more live. I must have seen them about 50 or 60 times in the space of 5 years. But which album? That's the question. And I could have and nearly went with Slade. I think this is one of the few occasions where picking a live album actually would be acceptable, because so many people, that is the favourite Slade album, and unlike most, it's not really a greatest hits. But I was down to two, to be fair, that I really... And the one that's losing out is this one. So I'm not going to go with that, although I nearly did. Slade in Fame. So the album I'm actually going to go with as my number one 70s UK glam album is Old New Borrowed and Blue. There, inside. So this kicks off with Just Want a Little Bit, which is really good. Then my favourite Slade song of all time, When the Lights Are Out. Absolutely brilliant song. Should have been a single. Was recorded by Cheap Trick in the early 2000s, and they do a very good version of it. Sung, not very often, but this particular song was sung by Jim Lee, the bass player and co-writer. The hits on here are Every Day, My Friend Stan. So they're the big hits. But I don't know, it's just got every track's good. I'm just trying to look for other highlights. I don't know which ones to pick, really. Miles Out to Sea is really good. We're really going to Raise the Roof. How Can It Be? Don't Blame. Yeah, just brilliant. So excellent. And then that was the recent album remastered version that came out a couple of years ago, which also has Banging Man on it, which was a minor hit. Killing the Hot Town Tonight, which was a B-side. Actually, another track that's worth mentioning that's really good, which confused me actually, because I'm looking at the listing on this album. Do We Still Do It? Oh yeah, sorry, it is on there. Start side 2. Confusing me because they had the S the wrong way round. I couldn't see it on there. Yeah, it is on there. So Do We Still Do It is a really good song. So whilst When the Lights Are Out is my favourite Slade song, I really like Do We Still Do It as well on this album. So very close between this and In Flame. But yeah, decided to, in the end, to go with Old New Borrowed and Blue.
I would have been very surprised if you didn't pick. One thing I've got to say, it like the Sweet, Slade's so influential with a lot of American rock bands. I'm looking at you, Kiss. I'm looking at you, Quiet Riot. Even bands like Wasp. Listen to Blackie Lawless and his vocals, that real gritty vocals and the harsh guitars. You can sort of see parallels with Wasp, between Wasp and Slade. I think Slade are very influential. They could barely get arrested in America. I think the image was probably a little bit too out there, a bit aggressive, but phenomenally huge in the UK. For a couple of years, I'd have to say they were the biggest band in England. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah,
the biggest band.
One, yeah, number one after number one hit single. Filling out big arenas, etc.
Yeah,
I mean, it's funny what you say about influential, because they were hugely influential with the bands that you just said. But some of the other bands that have cited them are maybe bands you wouldn't expect. So the Ramones, Joey Ramone said, in an interview, that every time he hit the stage, he would pretend he was Noddy Holder from the Slade Alive album. He said to him that was the best album ever, and every time he went on stage, he was trying to emulate Noddy Holder. So there's a band you wouldn't necessarily like.
Sex Pistols.
And Sex Pistols.
The Damned.
Snyder says The Damned, but Dee Snider says that Slade, and particularly Noddy Holder, was the biggest influence on him, particularly his stage presence.
But get it.
Nirvana say, because Nirvana, Kurt Cobain saw Slade when they were sort of trying to break the States, and he says that Whatever Happened to Slade album, he thinks is the biggest influence on grunge ever. So things you wouldn't necessarily connect between Slade and other bands. I mean, obviously Oasis as well, but they talk about that a lot and actually recorded a Slade song. But yeah, you wouldn't necessarily think the Ramones. You wouldn't necessarily think Nirvana as being big, hugely influenced by Slade. So,
but if you saw a photo of them and you didn't know anything about them, you'd go, gee, they are the most unlikely looking group of lads to ever become rock stars, because they are a little bit, I'd say, menacing. They're not definitely soft and cuddly, are they? They're
Well,
sort
they're
of
not, but when you saw them on Top of the Pops, they don't come across as particularly menacing.
yeah.
Partly Dave Hill was always the clown. And you just see it there. That fringe, that fringe is anything
Oh,
but menacing, But he
oh,
was
but
always the clown, always trying to look silly and funny and
mm,
goofy. And Noddy always looked as if he was a bricklayer who just picked up a guitar.
mm,
So yeah, but that sound, that stomping sound, but I don't know.
encapsulated
Along with
glam.
along with Mark Bolan and T Rex, they would. The three for me, the big four of glam would be T Rex, Sweet, Slade, and Suzi Quatro. They were the four that absolutely dominated Top of the Pops. And at
Well,
least one of those were on every week over a period of 4 or 5 years. So,
well, well, my friend, you have missed out on one, and I will put this as my number one.
I know who you're going to say.
There's
Yeah,
one that you haven't mentioned,
there is.
and David Bowie and the Spiders of Mars, the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders of Mars. I think this is in probably my top 10 albums of all time. It's a masterpiece. It's vaguely conceptual, where he plays the character of Ziggy Stardust, this androgynous alien rock star sent to Earth to save our souls, a kind of messenger. And he wins the hearts of fans, but suffers a fall from grace, succumbing to his own ego. That band, man oh man, one of the greatest bands ever put together on planet Earth. Mick Ronson, guitar hero, Trevor Bolder, the great Trevor Bolder, later of Uriah Heep. You know, just such a wonderful band. 5 years, Moon Age, Daydream, Starman, Lady Stardust, Ziggy Stardust, Suffragette City, Rock and Roll Suicide, killer, 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 killer. There is no filler. Why, my friend, did you not put David Bowie in the top five?
Well,
That is
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you why I didn't put David Bowie in the top five. Because for me, glam rock was Top of the Pops, and he very rarely appeared on Top of the Pops. And I mentioned earlier that it was predominantly a singles thing.
yeah.
And he was much more. Yes, Suffragette City was a hit, and he had
Starman,
loads of
that was a hit.
Starman was a hit, but most of his hits were outside of the glam, I would suggest, kind of bubble. And to me, there's a few like that, and I didn't mention it at the beginning because I wasn't sure who you were going to pick. But Elton John, Queen, David
Yes.
Bowie could all be included within glam, but aren't to me glam, because to me glam was all about watching these bands week in, week out on Top of the Pops and the hit singles,
Yeah.
which is why it's difficult with some of them. Some really great glam bands, in
Yeah.
my view, like Wizard and Mud, but their albums are patchy, so I couldn't pick
Yeah.
their albums. So I love that album. And it
Yeah.
is definitely a glam, and it's definitely a glam rock album.
It
But
is. It
it's not
is.
my glam rock. It's not what
No,
I think of as glam rock,
I
and
understand.
that's why I struggle.
Yeah.
Because I had a list of 10. Well, 10 artists more than 10 albums. Because as I say, quite a few of these bands I had more than one album. And Barry, I kept thinking, do I have it in there, and don't I have it in there, and. Alvin Stardust was another one, but again, some great singles, but the albums weren't very good.
Oh, he was. Yeah, he was a bit bland. He was a bit RSL. I don't know.
I don't know, but I like the
Yeah,
single. But you can say I nearly went. If I'd gone with Queen, I would have gone with that Sheer Heart Attack, which I think is the
for
most glam
sure.
rock of the album. And
For
a
sure.
band that nearly made it, and probably when you see it, is one of the most glam rock bands of them all is the Glitter Band, and I don't mean the other band who we don't talk about anymore, nor should we, but the Glitter Band themselves, really good. Lots of hit singles.
Yeah.
And this is a pretty good album. Tell Him, Angel Face. What else? Just For You, big hits, great. But then it's got some crap. It's got so many cover versions like Sea Cruise and Sealed with a Kiss and Give Me Some Loving. And you just think, I don't know, the songs I like on it are good, but it's not good enough to make it. So
yeah. But just to circle back to David Bowie and just to my last point. The thing that I like about this one is, you know how we were saying about a lot of glam rock is a lineage back to old style rock and roll. There's so much old style rock and roll.
Yeah.
I mean, well, this album's got vaudeville, it's got crooning, but it's inevitably rooted in old style rock and roll, and that's why I think it was my number one glam album. So yeah, it's not the singles, it's not the top of the pops, but you know, it's a concept album, and he picked a glam character. And to me, I think him and T-Rex were right at the epicenter of the tornado of glam rock, and there was a lot of artists around. And this album is the one that it's sort of timeless. It just lasts.
Absolutely. And if you sort of look on Google, etc., you will see that there's a debate: was it T-Rex or was it David Bowie that started glam rock? And the truth is, in my mind anyway, it was both of them, because they were both very close friends. Yeah. They were both talking about the same time.
And rivals.
And Mark Bolan was probably the first one who played it on Top of the Pops, but I think David Bowie was the first one who actually played it on stage, took that look on stage. So the two people were running in tandem, and I think you've got to say it was jointly. I think they both jointly created that glam rock look. So yeah, very difficult. I knew when I put the list together that me not having David Bowie in there was going to be controversial. And I'm sure lots of people in the comments will pick me up on that, and I understand why. And particularly when I had the heavy metal kids instead.
I think that's an inspired. That's an inspired pick. I like that one a lot.
But at the end of the day, as I say, my glam. David Bowie. I love David Bowie, I love David Bowie from that era. I'm not so much of a big fan after Let's Dance. I think it's the last album I really like. But yeah, really, really big fan during that era. But yeah, I decided to stay true to my kind of view of glam rock. So.
Well, there we have it. Another show where the Parish and Rock and Peter Kerr have gone like that, and we've come up with our 5 greatest UK glam albums of the 70s. We will do more shows.
Hang on a sec. You pulled me up on No David Bowie. I'm going to pull you up on No Slade.
Yeah. They were on the cusp, and I would have done Flame.
Yeah.
Yeah, just... Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a real tough one. But anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's all good. Parish and I, we're going to do more shows in 2026. Please put your comments. We want to read what your favourite glam rock UK 70s albums. So much great music, so many albums. We love reading your comments. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. And the Parish will be on very soon, doing more shows in 2026 and beyond. Thank you very much for this show, Parish. It's been
brilliant.
You can have a beer now and wipe your brow, because it was a tough assignment, I tell you, mate.
It was a very tough assignment.
All the best, mate. Cheers.
Thanks.
See ya.